So made that automatic, that was an improvement. Okay, let's try turning on the video.
Need a little sugar.
Okay, now working. The three, that, so I think we're gonna have to,
You want me to do this?
yeah, do you wanna just do the screen?
So that means I will run the presentation.
Yeah.
The blurry font almost comes out, like gives me a seizure.
I know,
Yeah.
really disorienting. Guess I'll plug in for now, and then if you start running, we can switch.
Welcome folks online, just starting to. Waiting for a few more people to trickle in, dealing with a few minor AV logistics. Are you muted?
Mhm. I'm muted.
Testing.
Is everybody? I don't know.
I think it's coming from your computer.
But where?
Yeah.
I think you're muted for your sound is on.
Oh, yeah.
But I thought that's how it is.
But dealer, the owl here, the only thing unmuted, and the only thing speaking.
So, better.
Testing.
Very strange.
Hey, welcome folks in the audience. We're using webinar mode tonight, which is slightly new to us. So please feel free to post away at the chat. We'll do our best to include participation from the audience as much as possible. But we do find the webinar mode makes it run more smoothly overall. But I see attendance light so far, just looking down the agenda, anything in particular that would be a good starting point while we're waiting for people to trickle in.
I think, well, other folks can join as well. I see Eric's got her hand up, but I did want to make sure that we introduced everyone to Lucy, who is our newest staffer on the mobility team, the new outreach planner, filling Kate's old position. And yeah, I don't know if you want to say anything about yourself, Lucy, but like that she's on the team.
Sure, yeah, this is week 3 for me, so still pretty fresh. But I'm a Somerville resident. I enjoy cycling, a former bike commuter. Now I just walk up the hill and yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, let's get off. I see Era has her hand raised. Era, you should be unmuted now or have permission to unmute now.
Thanks, Tom. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
I just want to let you know the chat's disabled. You said we could use the chat, but it is not enabled.
Might be on you.
Thank you for.
Or oh, Tom's the host now.
For the chat. You know it works. Don't. Hey.
Hmm.
You all happen to know how to enable chat. And thank you for bearing with us, folks. We're just clicking on.
Yeah,
chat
it's not
if
doing anything.
there is a chat.
Busy night.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Need more bike parking outside.
About it. I don't know who to talk to.
I read my bike.
And yours, yeah.
I was like, yeah, I know whose bike this is. It's fine.
Yeah, we can get it done. I think there's a way that you could edit this. You get it working?
There's a chat that I can type into. Ara, do you see anything in the chat?
I see your chat, but it still says chat disabled.
Gotcha.
Let's see if there are any settings on this side. Mm,
We're useless without Kate to.
Anything else?
Still chat for you.
I don't want to delay you. I guess we can just raise our hands if we have something to say.
No, this is helpful to figure out.
You're the guinea pig.
Okay, here we go. Pennies can chat. We will let everybody chat with everybody. Ara, you should have, or everybody, including the audience, should have chat permissions now. Can you handle that was fighting
Do you
words.
see my chat?
Indeed.
Indeed.
I regret to say that I can.
Thanks.
All right, one other logistic as we get started, I realized that I had not confirmed acting secretary tonight. Greg or Ian, any chance I can convince you to step up? I know Ian did last month as well.
To your computer.
Yeah, I have a.
I'm happy to check on.
No, I can do it. No promises on getting the notes up before, a month from yesterday, but
Yeah, I'm also happy to type.
this meeting is easy to take notes for. People said stuff about bikes. Just give me a minute to download the,
Right, much appreciated. I see Ted is here as well. Welcome, folks. I believe we have a quorum now, so we will kick things off. Let's go around the brief introductions. Welcome, folks. My name is Tom Lamar. I'm an East Somerville resident and chair of the committee. I'll go around to other committee members. Lena's not here yet. She had a 6-hour tattoo appointment earlier this afternoon. She was optimistic would be done earlier. Apparently does not yet, but she may join us later tonight. With that, Ted, I have just hopefully promoted you to panelist. Is there another button for me to click? You were joining as a panelist. You, Ted.
So I can talk. It looks like the video on my end is disabled. It says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. So don't know what's going on there, but
No particular voice. All right.
yes, that is my authoritative Zoom voice.
it's the Zoom bombing voice.
Change your panel. Maybe change panels to paint.
Yeah, this alleged that I can change your appearance, Ted. I don't know if I can change it too.
Making the cat.
All right, but don't go with the cat because that's already been done. So pick something else.
All right. Thus far, I do not see anything that is preventing you from having a video on. For anyone not familiar, we're trying webinar mode partly because it's a better process, partly because we got Zoom bombed last time. So a couple more months of this, and we'll know what we're doing for sure.
All right. Well, anyway, I think I can share my screen and talk. So why don't we just proceed with that?
Sounds good.
We'll solve the mysteries of Zoom later.
Yeah.
So,
I'm calling you then. Feel free to play around. All right. Over to Greg.
Oh, Greg Smith, member of the committee.
oh, sorry.
All right. I don't see Alex here, so passing it over to Mark for introduction.
Hello, I exist. Live in 10 Hills. longtime member.
Hey, Mark, welcome. And Ian.
Ian Wilson, member of the committee and acting secretary, unless someone else really, really wants to do it.
Greatly appreciated, Ian. You know the drill. Chime in as needed.
Yep.
And our ex officios, Adam.
Hey, everyone, also trying to look through these Zoom settings right now and figuring out what's going on with all of this. Adam Polinsky, co-liaison with Viola, to the committee and city planner for the city. That was a rough one. You all know me.
Viola Augustine, as Adam said, I'm the other member of the mobility division and the other ex officio for the bicycle committee.
And Lucy.
Lucy Gorel, Mobility Community Outreach Coordinator.
Welcome. Great to have you working with the city. And our guests, Era.
Hi, everyone. Ava Shore, guest and Ward 6 resident and Zoom troubleshooter.
Much appreciated. And Beatrice. You should be able to speak if you'd like. You're welcome to just be a guest as well. All right, so Tony guests, we'll do our best to include guests in the discussion as we can tonight. Feel free to raise your hands and or post in the chat as needed. With that, our next item is approval of the October meeting minutes. I know these only came out a bit recently, so I'll defer to folks. Should we pass these now or pass 2 months worth of meeting minutes next month?
I read them, but
I just give them had no concerns. All right, any concerns, corrections before we move to approve the October meeting minutes? Okay, seeing none, I believe Ian motions to approve the October meeting minutes, seconded by Greg. All in favor, please raise your hand, say aye, otherwise make your vote known.
Aye.
All right, with that, the October meeting minutes are approved. Next up, we have a call for any upcoming outreach events. Feel free to chime in with any upcoming events we should be aware of and or post in the chat.
Mark Chase is doing some sort of neighborways thing. I forget the details already, but he asked me to post it in the Cargo Bikes Facebook group, so I did. I can try and dig that up, but
We have it here too. It's this Saturday, and I don't remember
Yeah,
the time, but yeah.
There's the SAS Day of Remembrance on Sunday, and I think Era probably has the details. I don't have the details on me.
Era?
Yeah, thank you. SAS is a co-sponsor of the first Somerville and Cross City Day of Remembrance ceremony. It's on Sunday from 2:30 to 4 in Dilboy Park next to the tennis courts. And a number of the elected officials will be speaking. And more importantly, there'll be an opportunity for community members who've been affected by traffic violence to speak. And I can put a link into the chat of where it can be advertised or shared. Thanks.
One other event to share, the Illuminations bike ride is coming up for, I believe, tentatively December 16th. And often Brian Postlethwaite, former bike committee member and awesome city infrastructure planner, leads the ride, but says he does not have capacity to fully lead it this year. So we are looking for anybody interested in that to help step up. I've said that I can tentatively do it, but would love to find somebody else to pass it off to or to collaborate with. So again, that was December 16th, and we'd love to have somebody either interested in fully stepping up to lead that, or if folks are just generally available to help, who are pretty confident that they can show up and be familiar enough with the route to help prevent people getting lost, that's much appreciated as well.
I might have this on my Strava from last year, but does somebody have said route or the planned route for this year? Is it always the same?
It is always pretty similar. There will probably be some like slight tweaks sometimes to adjust for like road closures. Sometimes, you know, changes to which house is going all in on decorations or campus here, that kind of thing. So there will be some route planning that will largely be done ahead of time. But part of the commitment is just also like somebody able to like show up, corral people a little bit, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
I'll double check I can move a commitment, but then I can take over if I can move the commitment.
Awesome. Much appreciated. And I can pass along info as well. Thanks, Greg.
And I should be around if you need assistance with that. It was fun doing that last year.
Awesome. So yeah, again, looking for one person or to lead or co-lead the ride itself, and then just generally hoping for more and more folks to show up and help support as needed.
Also, Ted, if you do want to turn your video on, I think I fixed that. So you should, anyone that wants to, should be able to now. All right. Now we're cooking.
Panelists, just a heads up, I set you back to being muted for now. Feel free to raise your hand and we'll include folks as we can. All right, our next item is reviewing 2 city projects, Tough Street and then West Broadway. Ted, we will hand it over to you to lead that discussion, if that's all right, and give you screen sharing privileges as soon as we figure that out.
I think the easiest way is making host.
No, I think I changed that
Oh, you
setting
changed?
too, hopefully.
Oh.
I don't know if it applied. I tried to change a global setting.
Ted, do you have screen sharing permissions?
You're muted, Ted.
Muting is on me. It says host disabled attendee screen sharing.
Okay.
So I think I have more notes though on the Tough Street redesign, to be honest, to go over than West Broadway, but I think we have a few thoughts.
Ted, can you try again? Share your screen.
All right. Can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay. So I think most of the comments that I have are actually on Tough Street rather than West Broadway reconstruction meeting 1. If somebody has particular feedback or if they wanted to chime in on that, you know, I'd be open for that. Or I could just go with the Tough Street comments. What would we?
Let's start with Tough Street, and then we'll cover West Broadway when we get to that.
Okay. I'm sorry. I also wanted to try to pull up the plan here, so let me. Now I have the tab open. All right. Anyway, let me do this again. I'm not sure how familiar folks are with the proposed concept. I know we've talked about, I think the last time we discussed this, there were 2 options on the table. There are now, I think, more concrete plans in this meeting of a particular concept for the meandering street with wider sidewalks, with some additional safety features, including raised crossway gateway here on Cross Street, some raised intersections throughout the project, and additional raised crosswalks. So I think some of the comments are on the pullover spaces. Some of the comments that we have are on the general design. So I think one thing that is noted is the intersection of Washington Street doesn't exactly align with the crosswalk across Washington Street that would provide access to the community path in East Somerville Station. You know, that's a little bit beyond the scope of the project. There is an image that kind of went through this, which is not loading now. So let me see if I can find it. When technology works. Nothing like redoing this on the fly. So I think Tom actually gets credit for editing this.
No, just from the city presentation on a hidden slide. So if it's convenient, I could also share my screen. I think I have that reasonably handy.
Okay, here we go. That helps. Right, so the green line in the images shows kind of a zigzag that would be necessary, but of course this zigzag would require people to dismount and walk their bike across the street, which is probably not an ideal approach. I think that was one bit of feedback that came across. Currently, it can be crowded with people, so I think there was some indecision on our part whether that might set up conflicts with pedestrians, which may or may not be mitigated by the incoming floating bus stop design. So I think another piece could be curb ramps so that the angle of a bike on Knowlton turning back onto Washington isn't too awkward. Because in other words, biking on Knowlton could actually be a better approach to making a left turn here than biking immediately on Tufts Street. So I think that would be one idea, is thinking about the angle and placement of curb ramps to maybe facilitate going and turning left in that direction. So I think another element was cyclists coming on Washington from Union Square to turn left into the new protected area on Tufts Street. So this presumably might be a better way to get to East Somerville for bikes, or to get to local streets within East Somerville for folks coming off the community path. I think one idea was the Porter Square jug handle, and could work quite well here. I think this was a comment from Ian, again, to keep in mind, dealing with a larger bike like a cargo bike, where it might not be too feasible to quickly dismount it unless it's absolutely necessary. So that's part of our all ages and abilities argument to maybe rethinking that. Otherwise, I think the comment I think was related to pullover spaces that folks shared was, on one hand, the additional pullover space seems like a great idea for riders who may be less comfortable biking in the street or slightly more risk averse. but I think there was a notion towards how could we make it designed for biking slowly rather than walking a bike. Just in general, because of the sort of argument that designing for walking a bike can be a slippery slope in terms of where do we draw the line in when we stop designing for that versus specifically for bikes. So those were the general comments, I think. So most of our concern is about the connectivity of this to the community path, particularly given the proximity to the East Somerville exit of the community path. I don't think we had any other concerns actually about the extent of the street that I see.
Thanks, Ted. This might be a good point for other folks on the bike committee to chime in. Could you go back to scroll back down a few slides to the intersection on Washington Street? For now, I'll assume that'll be our main focus, but we can look at other areas as needed. So yeah, just to check, are folks familiar with this intersection in general and the kind of complexity of this crosswalk that almost aligns and is very much a high demand point for accessing the community path and East Somerville Station? Ian?
So I biked through this for a year, getting over to Capuano from Argenziana. One question, and this isn't maybe need to go collect data. I only turned left onto Tufts Street. I never actually came off of Tufts Street because it's one ways, and if you follow the one ways through to Capuano, then you come out the next street up. I forget the street name. Right, yeah. So I don't know how many bikes are turning left here, but I would be interested if it's like one bike an hour, like maybe walking is fine. But if it's any sizable number of cyclists that we expect there, I know we've said this in the past that at least in our role as the Somerville Bicycle Advisory Committee, we really want to advise that we are, creating bicycle infrastructure, not pedestrian infrastructure. We will compromise that makes sense. Sometimes you don't get exactly what you want. But I think we are somewhat obligated to say, like, no, we can't walk a bike. Like, that's going to set up conflict because we know cyclists are not going to get off and walk for 10 feet when they can just kind of cruise through. It is what it is, but I will mention that. The other thing, the left turn, the biggest problem I had with that coming from Union Square on cargo bikes specifically, but also just a regular bike, is people in cars are flying up that ramp from under the underpass. And without a safe place to pull over and stop, it's really not safe feeling to get across the street. There's room there, I think, for like a jug handle. And there's a curb cut that I don't think actually is a crosswalk. And I'm very confused by that because I think
It's the driveway to the pump station.
Oh, is that okay?
Yeah,
There's like a faded crosswalk marking there for a while, and so
that's the old one.
okay,
That will be replaced by this one.
okay. So I use that curb cut to get up and then walk or roll through the crosswalk, and it really depended on traffic and how safe it felt to just stay on a bike or get off and walk. It was a disaster most of the time because no one's paying attention to that crosswalk, but you do what you got to do. So trying to formalize that, I think, would be really important. And that technically is a shared sidewalk coming off the community path. So I think that's okay to put like some green or something down there. So
that would have been, can you, Ted, can you go to the next one that has just the intersection? Sure. Yeah. So just for everybody to understand what Ian is talking about, the movement from Union Square, you would be on the green bike lane, but parallel to that, the whole sidewalk is a shared path sidewalk that connects the community path and the East Somerville Station to this crosswalk. And the reason that it's a green backing of the crosswalk, the design is meant to be for pedestrians and bicyclists. So you're not required to dismount. You're just like, have to be courteous and drive. And so that is the intended movement to turn left onto Tufts for anybody, who wants to be safe. And my question would have been is like, would you guys be okay to do the Porter Square Juggernaut, which the picture in the left, down in the left is exactly that, it's from Porter Square.
I did that most days. At some point, the curb cut for the driveway was closed, I think, or
Mhm.
maybe it was just a bad ramp. And I actually went all the way up to the next corner, like right off the top,
Mhm,
and then just
like
did a
turned
clover
around,
leaf.
yeah,
And it felt ridiculous, but there's room and there's never pedestrians there. And I was like, well, I'm doing the best I can.
yeah, yeah.
But there's no safe way to get left across that lane of travel from the bike lane. You kind of have to go to the right and use the crosswalk. So
Crosswalk,
just
I-
formalizing that in some way.
Yeah, I also like the idea of the juggernaut because it formalizes that, and I think importantly, looking at least how it's striped here, I don't think it cues motorists in to expect bikes to be making that motion. So
Mhm.
I would favor that. For
I think that's actually, that may be signed as no left turn, like 7 to 9 a.m. or something like that anyways.
There used to be a sign and I don't know if that's back again, so yeah. But that wouldn't be pertaining to the bicyclists.
Will this intersection be signalized as part of this?
No, well, nothing is ever straightforward. So as part of the GLX project, this was supposed to be signalized. However, that was when that driveway that we were just talking about actually was leading into a bus, a drop-off area. So since that is not the case anymore, we did a traffic signal warrant, and with the numbers that we had 2 years ago now, it didn't warrant a traffic signal. So our approach is we want to have this floating bus island with the rapid flashing beacon installed. And then 3 to 4 months into after it's installed to do another warrant. And then see if it's needed or not.
So Viola, just to confirm, the rapid flash beacon would be across the intersection on Washington.
Yes.
Okay, so I think our other comment about this when we first talked about this would be putting that beacon in such a way that it could be activated by a motion or somebody on a bike. Said technology.
Yeah, and I talked to somebody briefly, and I can't remember whom, might have been Jessica, that those don't work that well yet. Is
Okay.
one comment, which doesn't mean that we cannot do it. And then because this is an MBTA project, I don't have high hopes that they will install that.
Yeah, we're just in the case of like automatic detection.
Mhm.
Yeah, the technology just isn't there yet, but we did locate the push buttons as close to like they're
Okay.
basically as convenient for both pedestrians and cyclists as possible, so that where you actually want to cross the street, there should be a button right next to you.
What about if I'm on a cargo bike and my front wheel is 6 feet that way? Can I still reach it?
My guess
That's a
is
good
not.
question. Yeah.
Can we fix that? I realize it's a big ask, but
My suggestions would be both whatever we can do to make it easier for the RFB to be triggered is good, but also as much as we can do to like not rely on that more than necessary and have as much traffic calming that does not rely on a button being hit.
How long is it?
the urban arrow is 8.5 feet long from wheel to wheel. When I'm sitting on it, the front wheel is probably
6 feet or?
5, 6, probably 6 feet in front of me. And so the biggest issue I've run into with poor signal placement is I can't reach the button, and it's like yelling at one of the kids, like, "Hey, go hit that button!" And they're like, "Dad, I'm just sitting here. Go away." Like, no, we can't get across the street now.
The question in the chat from Mark about the wait for green sign on the Minuteman, I believe at Lake Street that has auto detection. Feel free to add more, Mark.
Oh yeah, that's yeah.
Like that is auto detection. You guys saying that the technology is not there for buttonless detection. Like how is that existing, but we can't have it literally light up some yellow lights?
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
And even the Kensington underpass has auto detection for those yellow lights. Like there's no button to activate those things.
Yeah, I don't know about the Arlington case. That's definitely something we can follow up on. That's a good point. I know that the MassDOT one, they've had issues with that actually working to the level of accuracy that we would want it. So I think there's just more follow-up needed. It's something we're definitely, we just haven't done it yet in Somerville, but you're right, Mark. There are cases where it's being tried. But we just want to make sure that it's actually going to work the way we intended. But yeah, when I've been over on the community path, the one at Lake Street in Arlington, that does generally seem to be working pretty well. So we can follow up with them and see if they've been happy with it.
And there's also an RFP that's triggered on further west in Arlington on Mill Street, I think just west of the Arlington Center.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. It should be more clear. The technology does exist, but I don't think it's quite, it's not perfect. Yeah, that's for sure.
This has come up a couple of times. What's the legal, I don't know, ruling on if a cyclist is in this crosswalk and it's painted green and they get hit by a car? Are they at fault because they're rolling through?
We can check that. I don't know.
I think it would be prudent to know what that is, because last I looked in Massachusetts, the law is really not great for this sort of thing, unfortunately.
Related to that, I think it's a little, I think the law also, though, does make a distinction if it's a bike path per se. So as usual, I'm totally vague on these things because there is sort of a crossing of a multi-use path here. So
Yeah.
that might be something for a lawyer.
Yeah. Is it
Yeah.
possible to have
Yeah,
the city
we'll check.
solicitor?
We'll check.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I think related to that, could the width of the pedestrian stripes be reduced and actually make that a true cross bike as opposed to, just green background?
Sorry, Ted, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so it looks like there's an extent here that is striped. The whole thing is in green, but there's an extent here coming from the crosswalk that actually has the standard 5-foot width of what looks like a bike crossing.
Yeah.
So could you reduce the overall length of the white pedestrian stripes and actually make this a cross bike? I think
So-
some of the comments were concerned about pedestrian conflicts. So if pedestrians expected bikes here, that might reduce.
Yeah,
that
there
problem.
was discussion about that. And the overall consensus at that point was bicycles will go where they want anyway. That nobody just actually uses the green. Especially since it's coming from a multi-use path on the other end, on the other side.
Yeah.
So why not make it a clear conflict zone for everybody? And the green at the floating bus is obviously so you can wait separately, but then once you get to the crosswalk. And we would also need then a green path in the other direction. This way,
Green path.
for that
Oh, I see.
juggernaut that we're
You would need
talking
more
about to
crossing.
go, yeah.
I think in the context of a shared use path, this probably makes sense and it's fine.
Yeah, that's what I was leaning towards as well, because there's kind of not quite that designated, like, separate bike for pedestrians based on the sidewalk-ish leading up to this. Cool.
Yeah,
so
no, I seeing
more
that there
comments
isn't
from folks, and
space
then
for
we'll,
the bi-directional,
that
that
in
makes
it.
sense to me.
Can I actually ask, one thing that we had discussed is because this whole situation of the shared path, if we would provide coming out of Tufts, kind of consider that sidewalk leading to the crosswalk also as a shared path, and then figure out the right, movement, would that work for you? And we would do the juggernaut, maybe they're like shown, but then you can do the.
I think something like that would be fine. I think the only thing I would be curious about is if we could put like a sign or something that makes
Yeah.
it clear, like this is not just a sidewalk, it's a shared use
Shared
path.
use path.
And as long as everyone is as clear as we can be on, like, we have to share this space, I think that makes a lot of sense because it accomplishes the goal of like getting cyclists to slowly bike through the shared use space, and pedestrians are not gonna be like, oh my gosh, where'd the bike come from?
Yeah.
Well, the
Yeah.
sign says, watch out for bikes.
That's actually basically what I was going to suggest. I'm biking through here like basically every day to get to the path from East Somerville, even with a slightly further crosswalk. And it's almost tolerable to bike on there with the current width. It's like the sidewalk feels slightly wider than most. Right now there's a bit of a conflict because there's a bus stop there and often people waiting for the 86 there. Hopefully that'll be less of a conflict when it's a floating bus stop, though I don't know if the design is that people comfortably wait for the bus and ahead of time in the floating area.
The waiting area is on top of the drawing.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, great.
So there would definitely not be a conflict.
Gotcha. So yeah, I would be like pretty much in favor of that. And I think, still, sorry, Zoom folks, you can't see it, still like slightly awkward, left turn for somebody biking on Tough Street, getting onto the sidewalk. But I think that's tolerable enough on the raised crossings. As long as we avoid any like street furniture causing unnecessary conflict there, I think that's pretty tolerable.
Can the crosswalk across Tough Street be green backed to make it very clear, like follow this way up?
Yeah, you should definitely write that.
So would if you have the juggernaut over here, given that this is a raised crossing, would that be wide enough to put the green stripe in at the same level as the white pedestrian stripes? Or would it basically end up being like on the slanted part of the raised treatment?
Are you talking about a separate green path?
Yeah, or so you would just do the same thing here where you would put green backing to the.
Yeah, I think that would make sense again.
Yeah, and then maybe like if there's some sort of like dotted green, something that you could put a few marks on the sidewalk to make it clear, like shared space. I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah. There's supposed to be bike symbols on the sidewalk, on the other, leading to the Somerville station. They have faded. We have
something like that.
They were just paint, and I don't know.
Are those markings on? Is it HSIP who maintains all the markings? Is that like on their scheduled maintenance to redo those?
No, it's Somerville, isn't
it? Which one here?
Yeah, well, I was thinking here, but I was also thinking that there were like lines on the community path by the Davis Square, the sidewalk there that had faded and never got maintained. But just making sure that those lines are on some list that
yeah.
Getting.
I mean, this would be definitely on Somerville.
Yeah. It depends on the jurisdiction. If it's like in the busway in Davis, that's MBTA maybe owns some of that. I don't know, but a lot of that is us. So. All that kind of stuff, like standard like restriping stuff, that's always something. Just feel free to reach out to us about, and we can get that added to Jessica's like maintenance list.
Well, so I'm hearing consensus overall. I'll put a proposed resolution covering this as well in the chat in a moment. Just to check, do any members disagree with where we're landing in terms of designating this brief section as a multi-use path? And did anyone have concerns, thoughts about other parts of Tough Street? Hearing none so far, put a proposed resolution in the chat. As always, feel free to suggest any changes. So going over this, I'm saying that we support the proposed traffic calming overall on Tough Street. We strongly recommend designing the Washington Street crossing, assuming people will remain on their bikes. They won't dismount, even if that's awkward, but leaning into people staying on their bikes. And to accomplish that, we recommend designating this brief section of Washington Street sidewalk as a multi-use path, striping it as such, minimizing conflicts. We recommend striping this crosswalk across Tough Street in green to help accomplish that. We recommend that the Washington Street crossing, by now outside of the Tough Street project scope, but that's what we're very focused on. We recommend that be designed to accommodate cargo bikes. We recommend explicitly designating a place for eastbound bikes on Washington to turn left to go north on Tough Street. And just overall, we reiterate how stressful this Washington Street crossing is. Well, technically that's out of the project scope. It's very, very close, and anything we can do there is great. Anything to change there? Anything I'm missing?
I think that covered it, Tom. Thank you.
Okay. If I'm not on the Zoom, so I can't see the chat. So if you want those in the minutes, can you email them?
Okay, hearing no concerns, I motion the committee endorse this recommendation regarding Tough Street. Do we have a second? Seconded by Greg. All members in favor, please say aye, raise your hand, otherwise make your vote no. Okay, motion is passed. Thanks, folks. And we can hand it over to West Broadway.
Sure, I did find some comments that we have on West Broadway, so happy to go over that. I'll share my screen. So this West Broadway is the other project that we were asked to take a look at. Kind of just put this in context of where on West Broadway we're talking about. So let me go to the stretch that we're dealing with. Or Adam and Viola, if you want to just give a brief overview, and then we can get into the street mixes about
Sure.
the scope maybe for everybody.
Yeah, so you guys are familiar with our annual resurfacing, what we call our annual resurfacing streets packages at this point. Every year we get a set amount of money to repave and reconstruct sidewalks on a number of streets around Somerville. And over the last few years, we've really started to up the game in terms of like what we include to, it's not just reconstruction of the sidewalk and repaving of the street, but including a lot of complete streets elements, raised crosswalks, curb extensions, protected bike lanes, that sort of thing. So West Wash was the FY23 package project. So, think of similar elements in terms of possibilities there. A lot of surface options are on the table, not everything. It's not quite the budget of a big capital project. We're not doing the same level of underground work. Things like street lighting are off the table. But there is a lot on the table in terms of how we can reconstruct the street to make it more of a Vision Zero street. And so West Wash was 23, Tufts was the 24 project, so that one's on the way. And we're definitely getting onto a better schedule where we actually have more time to give ourselves the appropriate amount of time to design these things and get a full construction plan in the bid so that our contractor knows fully what they're getting into and can start things first thing in the spring when they start it. So this is the FY25 project. So we're still about a year out from final design, and construction would begin likely sometime in 2025. But it's a 2-year construction cycle, so it depends on what else is in there and how priorities shake out. But that is the quick overview.
Cool, thank you. So this is the stretch from basically Teal Square to Allife Brook Parkway.
Ed, could you actually hop over to slide 16 before we look at the specific cross sections?
Sure.
So I thought this was useful context for the project, just showing like what the bike network plan calls for overall on here. So we can see that it calls for at least one direction of protected bike lane for the section of Broadway, except for a brief section where it calls for protected bike lanes in both directions to link some neighborways. So that's kind of the overall plan context. So it was also great to see that that's taken as like a baseline assumption in everything that the city is considering further on.
Yeah, good point, Tom. This is the first time that the bike network plan has been adopted and we're now considering that, yeah, part of these baseline assumptions. This is the first project that we've gone into that, so, except us.
This is the
It's a
first,
second.
this is the first street calling for any protected bike lanes that is being ignored. That's all. So yeah, with that, you can go back to the cross sections around slide 42.
Sure. All right. And we can talk about, I think at this point, since it's street cross sections, we'll be just giving a sense of what we feel would be, what we feel would be best. But let me go through some of the options. So this is as it is today: parking and two-way travel with 10 feet sidewalks. And lots of potholes and scariness if you've ever biked here through rush hour. So a few different options. So we definitely need to keep two-way travel. So that means basically, 22 feet of the road is, non-negotiable. We have about 40 feet total to work with. So we can do something with the other 18 to 21 feet. So what are the options? And we need to stay in compliance with the bike lane. So that means we need at least one direction of PBL in there. So that's 7 to 8 feet of road, so bike lane plus buffer, right? And then so that's left with 10 to 14 feet to re-envision how we want to use on the road and what to prioritize. So if we keep one direction of on-street parking, we can have two-way PBLs 7 feet wide. We prioritize on-street parking and bike mobility. This is another option. So grade separated cycle track on one side, PBL on the other, and we still get parking. And albeit narrower parking than we have today. Another option is if we prioritize transit and bike mobility. Could look something like this. So in other words, here we have a bus stop protected bike lane on one side and a PBL on the other. This does not, however, preserve parking. So there might be pitchforks. If we prioritize bus mobility, we'd put in a bus priority lane or a shared bus bike lane on one side. And again, keep the one remaining PBL as per the bike network plan. If we maintain on-street parking in the landscape zone, we still need to keep one PBL. So here now the landscape would be used for that one PBL. And if we prioritize sidewalks and biking, we might land on a design like this. So yeah, those are basically the options that the city has proposed and gone through in the first community meeting. And I think, our general consensus is to advocate for, at the very least, parking protected. Of course, keep the PBL to be in compliance with the bike network. And I think we both think as a minimum to synergize the benefits of prioritizing mass transit and biking, we would advocate for a parking protected bike lane with floating bus stops for as much of the project area as possible, if we can't just have our two protected bike lanes in each direction. So I'm in general agreement with that. Given that, I think, as Tom pointed out, this particular stretch of road is not really a high priority for the MBTA as far as we're aware for implementing bus priority. So I think.
Thanks, Ted. Sorry to carry off. Yeah, I think that's really good background, and with that, maybe a good point to open it up to other committee members. Curious how folks are feeling overall, leaning towards a particular cross section here, or other things to suggest at a high level.
Then I'll say again, I think our role, we kind of have to say, yes, bikes, and then compromise on, okay, mostly bikes. The one thing last I checked in, I think there wasn't a set direction on which way the protected bike lane was going to go. Is that still the case? The guaranteed protected bike lane?
That is still the case. However, most of those had bike lanes in both directions, didn't they?
Yeah, but are you talking about in terms of like the bike network plan
Yeah.
designation? Yeah.
Mostly I'm thinking there's a not significant slope, but there is a slope in one direction that makes it harder to bike uphill, and having the better protection on that side where cyclists are going slower is kind of nice. I think we should actually think about that more than just saying that here, but you know, I'm far more comfortable playing with cars if I'm going 20 miles an hour down a hill and cars are supposed to only be going 20 miles an hour. Works great on Powerhouse.
Do we have any, so since that Powerhouse is kind of the complementary route there, do we have a timeline for when two-way protected bike lanes would be considered on Powerhouse?
No, I'm pretty sure it's not on the priority
Yeah.
list, so most likely not before 2030.
30, yeah.
What we are considering is that there's an alternative neighborway connection so that we make sure that that is there.
So related to that, are you're talking about the Hooker Ave Endicott neighborway, or the other side of Broadway beyond?
Yeah, I think that is the one that's on the priority network.
And I think this was also an area where there were some questions around a number of these streets are designated for one-way protected bike lanes. So is that still up in the air which side or which direction that would be for these?
Yes.
Yeah. I guess.
And if you scroll back up slightly to, let me check the exact slide. But yeah, I wanted to add, like, my general thoughts are that, you know, I'm very supportive of bus priority where we can. And definitely want to respect the bike network plan, only calling for a protected bike lane, or not necessarily calling for protected bike lanes in both directions. But I do want to also note that, based on what the MBTA has shared so far for their wish list for bus priority, I just dropped a link in the chat to like a Streets blog article covering that. It doesn't look like the stretch of Broadway is on that wish list for priority. And buses still do get some priority from just bus stop consolidation and floating bus stops along the route. So I think my preferred outcome would be going up another slide or two, like the parking protected bike lane for as much of the section as possible. And if that turns into a bus lane for a queue jump at intersections as needed, totally reasonable to do wherever it's helpful for buses as much as possible. But I'd probably prefer if as much of it as possible looked like this with floating bus stops, and we're fine if there's some parking there in other places needed, or that was my take at least.
Tom, is this the slide that you were thinking of?
Let's see, the narrow section or whatever. Maybe one more ish, whichever one shows the like parking protected bike lane.
Was there any discussion yet of providing adequate loading zones for businesses or residents here and what that would do for basically taking over parking?
That's definitely part of the conversation. Like that's very much something. We're doing a much better job these days of engaging businesses early on and trying to figure out what their needs are. And like our best tool in the box to do that, especially if we do need to take away some parking, is to figure out what regulations can change to better meet their needs with the parking that remains. So yeah, we're asking early and often, and we usually don't have all those details ironed out by the time we present a concept, but we stay in touch with them and try to figure that out. But like, for example, on Holland Street, we actually just went back to the traffic commission last month to make some changes for Angelina's to try and close the loop on some of that. So
Awesome.
yeah, it's been helping too with not everyone's always happy, but it has helped the when we do need to make those changes, it's a good mitigation option.
Do parking changes on side streets count as in scope for this project if you wanted to like shift the loadings onto around the corner? Okay.
Yeah.
Given the recent changes with the enforcement sticks, could any of that be used for bus lanes on this on West Broadway?
I don't think for bus lanes. I think the way we've been able to use those, my understanding is because they're stopping violations, not moving violations. That's kind of the loophole. So I like we could, if people were stopping, I don't well, it is a loophole, but if they're parking in like a bus stop or a bus lane, sure, then yeah, they could do it. But that's also another reason we've been prioritizing floating bus stops more often, is because you actually can't physically stop in them if it's full of concrete. So that's been another way to we've been weighing the trade-offs of bus lanes versus like just better bus stops and making them better places to wait to.
It's fascinating about the idea of using floating bus stops to prevent that. I hadn't thought about that.
Oh yeah, I live right by Powderhouse Circle, and every day I see the one on College Ave, just south where those businesses are. I'm like, we're gonna make that floating one day. A lot of enforcement issues there. I should say illegal parking.
So recapping what I'm hearing so far, first, if there is only one direction of protected bike lane, that we suggest prioritizing the uphill direction as much as possible and providing an alternative complementary route as soon as possible. But we also would prefer, as much as possible, the cross section similar to this, with parking protected bike lanes in both directions and floating bus stops. Fine with that turning into bus lanes intermittently as needed. Anything else you want to have? Anything that I'm missing? Any disagreement?
I mean, I think, yeah, as far as street configuration, that would be great. I think, considering some of the conflict points at either end, like facilitating getting onto the bike lane on Holland, or putting in a bike box at that intersection at Teal Square, if you're coming up Broadway in the uphill direction, would be a couple of. Is there? Has that recently been striped? Okay.
New-ish. You might want one the other way now, though.
Yeah, I will have to double check that. If you're, if you're coming from the bottom of the hill by the Stop and Shop going up.
No, the other, sort of. There is a bike box. This is not a two-stage left, but you could use it as such if you can get through the right turn
Yeah,
from the fire station.
yes. And if you are going straight, it isn't too comfortable to bike through that intersection if you're continuing on Broadway after Teal Square.
Yeah.
That's general.
Anything else before we go to a resolution encompassing this? I'll just note in my proposed resolution here, I'm not attempting, there's some good discussion about loading zones and enforcement, and I'm not currently capturing that, and I think those are like more general suggestions.
Oh, was there any discussion yet of how everything ties in down at Elwich Brook Parkway?
There was
Because
not. That was another point we should.
I know that's state stuff now and it gets complicated. But just a consideration of what cyclists are going to do coming down Broadway, especially if they're in a protected bike lane, they're going to want to probably cross over to the off-street path on the other side of the intersection, and what sort of pedestrian conflict that may encompass. Don't think there's a straight answer for that yet, but please consider that.
Yeah, and to that point, Ian, there's actually $100,000 set aside that our state delegation was able to get to study that intersection, and we are starting to proceed with scope on that effort. So we're gonna have to rely on DCR to actually, you know, approve and fund any final construction, but we're at least starting the process and of studying alternatives for that intersection, even going so far as like survey of the entire area and traffic analysis and
Awesome.
studying alternatives. So yeah, we're making progress on that, and it's very timely, given that the two projects are,
So
you know, that
was,
this project is happening too.
that was 100,000 just for the study. And
Yeah,
then
just for like study concept design, and then
Okay.
we'll have to figure out where to go from there.
Okay,
But,
I was like 100,000 is not gonna replace like lights.
no,
or
no, no, no,
Okay.
no, this is, yeah. 100,000 won't even get us a final design, unfortunately, but you know, it's
Yeah.
something, get our foot in
Yeah.
the door.
Cool, awesome.
Yes.
Just want to make sure I write it down.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Just to check in, did you have any suggestions for specific design treatments, or is it at this point, do we just want to make sure that some thought goes into
I mean,
project boundary?
it really depends on how much money is available. Ideally, there would be a complete redesign of the intersection, so you're not having these crazy left turns on, no left turn arrows, and there's just so many crashes there. It's insane, but that may be wildly out of scope. So I don't necessarily want to go propose anything other than like go do everything perfectly fine and get money from nowhere. But we got to be realistic there.
I will suggest we recommend working with DCR to make improvements to Broadway.
That sounds good.
I think
all right.
related to that, I think getting even though there is a bike box, if you come up Holland to Teal Square, I still worry about that turn where cars like to make the right onto Curtis.
Yep.
While bikes are going straight. So I would wonder, that seems like that would be an opportune place for a bike signal or a separate phase. Because I worry about the conflict of, even though it's now only one lane, I worry about the conflict of bikes and cars there.
Yeah, and just to clarify, Ted, we can, we're always open to looking to find ways to solve some smaller issues with different pockets of money and project opportunities, but Teal is outside the scope of this project, so it will be challenging. And I would say unlikely at this point, not impossible, but Teal's going to be its own beast to tackle at some point in the future.
Is there a rough timeline of that, or not even that yet?
No dates yet. Nothing. Yeah,
that's fair.
No discussions have been had. Doesn't mean it couldn't happen in a year or two, but yeah, we just haven't gotten that far down the road yet.
Yep.
So with that, I put a proposed resolution in the Zoom chat. Take a look. Let me know if we're missing anything, should change anything. So reading that through, first we're saying if there is only one direction of protected bike lane, we suggest prioritizing the uphill direction, and we suggest prioritizing an alternative complementary route. But however, while we respect their bike network plan only specifies one direction of PBL, We encourage the additional spacer to be used for parking protected bike lanes with floating bus stops as much as possible. We're fine with those turn into queue jump bus lanes as needed. And we recommend working with DCR to make improvements to Broadway at Illinois Brook Parkway. So it didn't explicitly include Teal Square in there, though I know that's a priority as well, and didn't explicitly include the suggestions around loading zones and the fancy parking enforcement sticks. So we definitely love to see that those everywhere as well. Any suggested additions or changes before we move to a vote?
That looks good to me, Tom.
All right, with that, I motion that we pass this resolution, seconded by Ted. All members in favor, please raise your hand, say aye, otherwise make your vote known. All right, motion is passed. Thanks, folks. So that's it for product review. So remaining, we're a little behind schedule, but I think this is very valuable discussions. We have our long-standing item around working with the police that we don't quite know how we want to handle. I'll pass it to Ian for what we want to do here, and then city update after that.
Yeah, so I can go best. The big thing that I want to kind of acknowledge is our role here as the Somerville Bicycle Advisory Committee is that we are advising the city on all things bicycle. And that includes mobility. We do a fantastic job with. We do a pretty good job with DPW, with the city council and the mayor. We used to do a decent job with SPD, but we no longer do. And if they're going to be going out and doing anything bicycle related without consulting with us, and they do something that the community doesn't really like, it potentially makes us kind of look foolish. And, you know, personally, I don't appreciate that. And I think we can all work together to actually provide education. You know, if Somerville Police is going to be pulling people over and educating while they're driving around a giant pickup truck and obstructing the bike lane for other cyclists, I actually asked the officer one time, can you please move out of the bike lane while you're doing this education? And he kind of gave me a hard time about it. And I was like, you're not being safe. You can't educate on safety when you're causing a safety problem. And he gave me a hard time about it. And I'm frustrated. I would really appreciate it if we could work more closely with them. I don't know the right way to do this. The other thing is the things that they are educating about are definitely illegal. You know, cyclists are rolling through pedestrian scramble crosswalk signals, but the majority of cyclists I see doing that are acting in a way that I believe they think is safer, to avoid a right hook, because, you know, there's a hill on the other side and they're trying to get slightly up the hill in front of cars to make themselves more visible, because they're trying to make a left turn and there's no way to make a left turn from the bike lane on the right side. And SPD has not given any guidance on what they consider education worthy versus, you know, oh, we're just going to discretionarily ignore, you know, that thing that you did that, you know, just like speeding. I think we can do better. I don't know how to approach that topic other than to kind of pontificate here. You know, I wish we could get a SPD representative here. I wish we could ask SPD for details on, you know, what the safety violations actually are. And some of that might be captured, I'm not really sure. And why they think it is appropriate to have a police officer, regardless of where the money's coming from, doing bicycle enforcement when there's so many other more dangerous actions happening, such as speeding, people driving while talking on cell phones, people driving while texting on cell phones. You know, I keep hearing that SPD is down officers, that we don't have enough officers. And if that's true, why are we dedicating an officer to doing bicycle education when people on the committee could easily do bicycle education if we knew that we needed to do it? You know, it's just a misallocation of resources from my point of view. That's kind of my spiel. I'm not sure what we could do about that here without someone from SPD to, you know, refute that. So I would love if we could convince someone to show up. I don't know how to do that. That's all I got.
Yeah. Well said. I think we need to give them this feedback somehow. In my mind, there are some open questions about, does that happen at a specific formal community meeting? Does this happen with just like a point of contact, the representative by committee, informally meeting with a representative of SPD to start the conversation? But I think it would be very helpful to give them some feedback. At least some of their enforcement, my understanding is from a grant, where in their grant application or approval, they specifically mentioned working with the bike committee, which
Yes.
to my knowledge has not yet happened. So I think finding the right way to make contact with them and give them some suggestions would be helpful.
Yeah, I would like to understand the budget aspect too, because if they are applying for the grant because that's the only way they can pay a guy, I mean, okay, I can work with that. Like we can all work together to make sure someone gets paid. But if they're applying for this grant and it's just overtime for an officer, I'm kind of like, why bother, right? Like this is not the right way to spend overtime public dollars. So I would like this to eventually become formal, but yeah, if informal makes more sense, that's fine. I believe that the chief of police position is still open, so that may play into this. I don't know if it's better to do this now and make this just be a thing for the next police chief to have to deal with, because we're already doing it, or wait, I don't know, but winter is a good time to have these conversations. It'd be great to have something, fruitful before springtime.
I don't think like waiting for the police chief is gonna be a thing, because it's been 3 years now. So how many more
Fair
years
enough.
do you want to wait? Like,
So I guess my suggestion here to try to find an action item, feel free to suggest differently, would be that mobility can suggest a point of contact with the police, and a committee member with some initiative, possibly Ian, can reach out to them and CC me, and we'll start the conversation. Probably keep it informal at first. We don't want to start out just yelling, but let's let's start the conversation.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think we had talked about this a month or two ago, and I think one of the things that would be helpful as well, is if like we've talked a little bit about what some of the needs are and questions are. I think typing that up and just like giving that to us so that we can also include that with our contacts at SPD would be really helpful, just to help them get a sense of like what you guys are looking for. And yeah, I mean, ultimately it's up to you guys to approach this how you want, but I think if the goal is to rebuild the relationship with SPD, the best long-term way to do that is to, not just come in and ask them, why did they do this enforcement this way, so that they never want to come back again. I think it's to like start small, build a relationship with one of the contacts there. They are short-staffed, so that's part of why it's been such a challenge. Deputy Chief Carabino was great. It's unfortunate that he retired, and we just haven't had that same connection, but I think it's definitely something we want to support you guys in fostering again and figuring out how we can avoid these kinds of issues going forward.
I do think that whatever we do really needs to be either the chief or, I don't know if there's a deputy chief right now, but someone basically running the department or in the room with the people running the department. We've in the past worked with patrol officers on a more regular informal basis, and they're great for just getting a feel for what is reasonable, but they often lack any authority to really make any real changes. I don't know that the chief of police has any authority to make changes here either, but I want to make sure that our time is not wasted, their time is not wasted. It's a hard conversation because it's a lot of just, why are we doing any of these things? And they probably feel the same. I can respect that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a reasonable question, right? The department got funding, which spurred the enforcement that nobody liked, which obviously the city council responded to. So I think the funding still exists. So I think a reasonable question is, you know, what is plan B with said funding is a reasonable way. Like, what are they thinking about as a next step to approach enforcement? Because presumably they still have ongoing funding to support some kind of activity. So that seems like a reasonable place to start. You know, I don't know if there's longer term interest in sort of restarting an enforcement committee or whatever we would want to call it going forward, or who amongst us, if anyone, has bandwidth to, you know, have those meetings again.
They wound up being not very fruitful, which is why they kind of tapered off. And I think it's because the wrong people were in the room from Somerville Police.
Even with Captain Jim, I think was the last person.
Yeah, I I like Captain Donovan. He's great. I think he is also very realistic about what he personally can achieve. I don't think he's in the right position to really help with these goals, unfortunately. He has implied that, at least, you know, kind of, it is what it is. It's not great. Sorry.
Okay. Well, what are our goals? I hear, you know, police not parking in bike lanes, unless it's an absolute emergency.
I think a concrete thing here is if SPD is going to do anything with bicycle enforcement with, you know, special grant money, or, you know, want to say we're doing bicycle education, sorry, not enforcement, that they ask for our help. I think we have a lot of expertise and can do better education than just stopping people on the road and saying, well, you can't do that. We're going to warn you. Don't worry. It's a warning. Because that doesn't really help. It just makes people be like, screw these guys. Like that's not what we want.
I was just wanted to plug that I know as part of the new bike safety bill, there's a requirement for a front and rear light. So there's like probably a good opportunity in handing out lights that that we could put, that the police can put in.
Do we still have funding for lights? At some point we had a bunch, I think, through Mass.
Maybe that grant money.
Yeah, maybe that grant money could be used for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's just let's try and like work together and think outside the box. If we really truly as a city care about bicycle education, let's work together and do that properly. Let's not just have people who may not know the first thing about bicycles go and be educating people about bicycles.
Great. So for next steps here, Ian, would you be up for kind of writing up some concerns? And I think the way you opened the conversation was great.
Yeah.
And I can work with mobility for how we're gonna move that conversation forward.
Yeah, I can do that.
All right.
Can we also make sure to include the city council or mayor or whoever's appropriate, just so there's a little more accountability? I just want to make sure that they are aware that we are trying to all work together in a collaborative sense.
Yeah, that's fine. In that case, I'd probably recommend a memo,
Okay.
something a little more formal.
Yeah, we don't have to start super formal. I just want to make sure that like this eventually turns into something that we actually are trying to do correctly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so, yeah, it's up to you guys, but if it's just a bullet point and some emails, we'll definitely reach out to SPD and
Okay.
start the conversation there.
We'll start with that then. That's
Right.
easy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ian. And with that, I'll hand it over to mobility.
Thank you. Literally have to hand over.
Indeed.
It looks like Era also has a comment in the chat too.
So, Eric, go ahead while I pass over host responsibilities.
No. I just reclaimed it.
Okay.
Oh, Aaron's asking me to unmute.
Can you
Yeah,
unmute?
yeah, now
Eric?
you have to
No, no,
unmute
no,
Era.
host.
Oh, I have to. Okay.
Yeah, you're the host now.
Where am I? Sorry.
I don't know, maybe go to the bottom.
It's just,
Like,
I'm gonna stop there for a second.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I just wanted to, I have two comments. The first is that I was a poll worker on election day, and the officer who was stationed in my precinct mentioned that they have officers back out on bicycles. And that surprised me. I didn't know that was happening. And I'm wondering if anybody else knew about that. It's not an official division yet, but they have 2 to 3 officers a day out on bicycles. His name was John, if that's helpful. Secondly, I want to just remind folks when the committee had a kind of robust committee structure or subcommittee structure, that enforcement was separated from education and encouragement, and that those were different tasks from different committees. And as you're thinking about spinning that back up, education and enforcement can be very different things. And I think that's part of the problem with the way that this grant is being administered. So just thinking about how do you encourage and educate without wrapping enforcement and policing into it. Thanks.
Yeah, they were separate and they were tied together because we couldn't get someone to run 2 different ones and then they separate, yeah.
Thanks, Eric. All right, over to mobility.
Number slides. Here we go. Oh, wait. No, you have it, yeah.
Yeah, it's up. You can all see it, can you?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm ready for the next one.
Okay. It's like, what's the number?
Nothing else to say on the title. It's fine. Only one, well, there's a couple more sprinkled throughout that are project specific, only other upcoming engagement opportunity. I don't think you guys had mentioned this earlier, but PTAC will be tabling at the winter farmers market, which is at the Armory. So if you guys are interested in joining them on that, I think they've done all the work to set that up and organize. But I'm sure if you want to reach out and sort of join on with them, that is one option, if anyone's available. So just want to make sure everyone was aware of that. Capital project updates, Spring Hill. If you've been on social media recently, you're probably aware that we started building some of our curb extensions on Summer Street over the last few weeks. And actually starting to realize a little bit of the final design for the Spring Hill sewer separation project. That sidewalk reconstruction is ongoing. They're not going to be fully done with everything on Summer Street this year, but they did start to install, this is photos from a couple weeks ago at this point, but they did start to install a bunch of new curb extensions up and down the Summer Street portion of the corridor. And they have sort of milled down the bike lane section going into the winter, so that will not be constructed this year, but the sort of half-raised facility that's in the final design will be done next year. School Street, there is a temporary course of asphalt that's now down. It's no longer a dirt street between Highland Ave and Summer Street. And it should be fully open for winter by Thanksgiving. So that's still in a temporary state, a lot to do there, but it should be reopened soon. And then Highland Ave, they are going to continue. I think Eversource has some work to do, so it's not all just city stuff. I think we're wrapping up the city portions. They've been doing like water main service tie-ins around the City Hall campus. But there's going to be some Eversource work taking place over the winter intermittently on Highland Ave. And then just our standard slide, we'll continue to do work, and a lot more of this project will start to come together in the spring of next year, and a lot of surface improvements. So we're excited for that. Powder House at Alewife Brook Parkway. The new signal is going up as we speak. So if anyone's been over there, there should be a brand new mast arm and new signal heads going in place over on Alewife Brook Parkway at Powder House Boulevard. And we are being told that it should be fully functional within a few weeks. It may even be in flash, which is a sort of standard testing thing for at least a few days, possibly next week. So we'll see how that all shakes out, but there should be a new fully functioning signal at that intersection by the end of the season. And then final paving, tree plantings, traffic calming features, and sort of actual functioning of the bike lanes still anticipated for spring.
Quick question, with the new signal in flash mode, or when it's finally up. Is the crosswalks also opened and cross bike also opened, and then the other crosswalk on the signal is taken out?
Yes, yes. I had that question as well. Yeah, they will be bagging that other signal. It's not gonna be at like final pavement grade, so they're gonna have to build ramps across, but it will be fully functioning, and so you'll be able to press the crosswalk button and cross the street. Or bike across the street. And then lastly, McGrath resurfacing, that is largely wrapped up for the year. I think they're continuing to do some bridge work. I don't know if that's happening over the winter or not. The striping, some of that striping has been deferred because they are continuing to do work on the Squires Bridge, which turned out to have even worse structural problems than they originally anticipated. But we are expecting the new bike lanes, which will be protected in, I don't know if it's the spring of next year off the top of my head yet, but next year for sure. We haven't focused on this too much in this particular committee, but I want to make sure that you guys were just aware. It's not super, there are some bike elements here, but some of the work that's been going on in Davis Square, there are kind of two separate projects, but I'm going to talk about them as one. We have been replacing all of the remaining brick sidewalks in Davis Square, at least the walkway portion, with concrete to improve accessibility there, but retaining brick in the sort of furnishing zone, calling it a, sort of an accent strip. Here's an example of what that looks like. So that they've been doing that work around the plaza on Elm Street, here kind of between Holland and Elm, in front of the CVS and the Boston Sports Club. And so that work is wrapping up this year. And then that same crew, they're actually a little bit ahead of schedule. They're supposed to wait to do some of that, or some of that was going to bleed into the spring. I think they're actually going to be done with all of that this year, or like 95% done. And this is the crew that's then going to go work on Western Washington Street. So we'll be getting a good start on that next year. There's also a separate project where we're upgrading signal equipment, timing and phasing, and then installing detection for transit signal priority. We talked about this at a committee meeting. I don't know if it was this year or it might have been last year at this point. But that work has sort of been kind of like starting up, and they've been doing some prep work. But it is very possible that by the next bike committee meeting, there will be a new signaling system in place. So I want to make sure that you guys are aware that work was happening. There is going to be a new 100-foot section of protected bike lane on Highland Ave, for example. It's a small piece, but like we're taking away that right turn lane and consolidating those 3 lanes into 2. The rightmost lane is going to be, it's going to have flex posts for now. It's probably not going to be striped. There's going to be only minimal striping. We'll do final paving in the spring. So there will be a new pattern, and I think you'll probably start to notice that in the next few weeks. The MBTA is managing it, so we've been having a hard time figuring out sort of the week-to-week schedule and exactly what's going to happen when. But just giving everyone a heads up that there will be some changes that, and TBD on how noticeable some of that is. But yeah, that should be done before the end of the year. We've had these projects on here for a while, but Grand Union complete, Powderhouse Boulevard complete. So I don't know if anyone's ridden the new facilities, but we've got all the flex posts in and everything striped on both of these streets now, which we're really excited about. We've been talking about them both for years now. And I think we can, be excited for what we've done so far, and always know there's more work to do, but I think we're really happy with the way these 2 quick build projects came out. And then Glenn and Otis Neighbor Way, there is a visioning session this Saturday, from 10:30 to noon in the East Somerville Community School cafeteria. If anyone's interested,
I will probably be there. Powderhouse has been fantastic to ride on. Even going downhill with cars with the speed humps. I'm going faster than the cars, even on the cargo bike, because I can get over the speed bumps faster than the cars can more comfortably, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, I agree. And I use Powderhouse quite a bit now myself. And it's like, even the uphill direction is great, obviously. And even the downhill has been fairly comfortable. Actually, you can basically go the same speed as a car, not even a little bit faster.
Yep.
And then last slide for me, and then I'll turn over to Viola, just some more general updates on wrap-up work for the season on our Complete Streets projects. Holland College, phase 1 is also complete at this point. All the flex posts are finally in, with the exception of, I think, like one block on College Ave. So that is forthcoming. I forgot to put that on here, but we do have one more batch of posts coming for College Ave going out of Davis Square. And then just a reminder, phase 2 of the Holland College project will take place next year. So everything, those were kind of intermittent gaps, particularly around businesses that we didn't get to. Holland, it was kind of up by Teal, and I think there was a block in the middle, and then closest to Davis Square, and then College, it was kind of just south of Morrison Ave. All of that will be done next year. Most of that's just going to be repaving and putting back what was there already, because we've made a lot of the mobility upgrades. But that will include, one big new feature will be the construction of a raised intersection on Holland at Irving and Thorndike, with 2 new crosswalks to cross the street there, which we know has been a big desire line for a while. So we're excited for that. Pearl Plus 6, the last major element of that work, Walnut and Gilman. They at least put in some of the new facilities with the curb extension and the 2-way bike facility connecting the path to Gilman Street. That, and they put in a new temporary raised crosswalk since I took that photo. But they're kind of in a wrapped up stage for this year. So it won't be usable quite yet, but they are going to come back in the spring and do all the final touch-up work, make sure the final paving is done, the raised crosswalk is built with the curbs in between, which it's not right now. And then we'll have a nice new facility there. But everything else in Pearl Plus 6 is pretty much wrapped up at this point. And there's just some little punch list stuff like signs and ponding issues that they're going to be working on over the next week or two before they leave town. And then lastly, Western Washington Street. If the crew that's working in Davis right now on the sidewalks is able to finish that stuff, or at least when the temperature gets cold enough that they can no longer pour concrete, they will also be moving over to Western Washington Street to do some drainage work in preparation for next year, which can occur in colder temperatures. So they'll likely be setting themselves up to really be able to start on the sidewalks first thing next spring. That'll turn over to Viola.
One quick question with Western Washington with the sidewalk work. Are we still trying to avoid Argenziano School while school's in session?
Yeah, it essentially just got pushed to next summer. So they'll be doing work like, kind of up to, it's obviously it's gonna be hard to avoid people you getting there, but like, yes, like in the immediate vicinity of the school, the plan is whatever those limits we said were, well, that'll just get pushed to next summer.
Awesome, thank you.
It looks like here I had a question related to Pearl Plus 6 about the Rotary Center Island.
Oh, yeah.
I heard that one of them was being redone or changed in some way.
Yes, one of them was Pearl at Glen, so it's already been completed. We did have to narrow it, unfortunately. DPW has plows that are 15 feet wide. The blades are 15 feet wide that use that section of Pearl Street. That was the dimension we had been working with, but when you account for the turning around the island, there actually wasn't enough room for those plow vehicles to make that turn. So we did have to make an adjustment and unfortunately make that circle a little bit smaller. So it's not quite the way we had envisioned it originally, but I'd definitely be open to people's thoughts on whether or not it's still kind of achieving the same effect. But yeah, we did have to make an adjustment at that one because it was the narrowest section of street. And so DPW is having issues.
It's nice that they're already out clearing snow.
Well, honestly, way better that they told us about this a month ago versus when we actually did get the first snow. It would be a much bigger problem.
So these are just like the same projects we talked about earlier, Tough Street and West Broadway. Just to give a little bit of a time for Tough Street, we're still collecting some feedback from, for example, the committees. Also, we worked with the fire chiefs and the fire trucks. This Tuesday, we set up a little test demonstration layout. And so we're wrapping all that up by mid-December, providing a memo and then continuing to 100% design. That will be the next milestone. And West Broadway, the first round of engagement is wrapping up. And there, the next step is to get a consulting team and develop the concept designs in a more technical way. And then the last thing was the Union Square Plaza and streetscape update. So the 25% design is uploaded to the web page, the Summer Voice page. And just to remind everybody, what happened last year is we wrapped up all the feedback sessions after a public meeting in March, I believe. And then we sort of started to separate a little bit the engagement with the plaza. There was a big plaza design public meeting in Union Square. And for the street configuration, we did a lot more targeted outreach. We talked to the businesses. We had 3 little pop-ups in different neighborhoods around the square. And we talked to the Union Square Main Streets folk. We talked to the Union Square Neighborhood Council. So we did an all-around getting feedback on the ideas we presented. And then the design team and the city collected and decided on what you see right now. So please remember, this is 25%. And the 25% design, if we start kind of at the intersection of Bow and Summer, that island will be gone. It's a more teed up intersection with smaller crosswalks. Bow Street, because we're still having probably at the beginning bus, or who knows when this will be done, but at last year's point, a shared street 2-way, a traffic circle that will, get in and out of Bow Street and Summer Street, also access to Wesley. And then the section between Wesley or Summer Street and Walnut is going to be a 1-way shared to give access to Walnut Street. And that gets you to the fully pedestrianized section between Walnut and Warren, sorry. And we are kind of, if you look through the design reports in the details, we are trying to make sure that there are parking areas at these what are now dead ends in Warren and at on Bow Street at Walnut, especially to allow some loading and unloading because of the post office. And then the pedestrianized Bow Street then turns into the plaza, a very extended plaza. So we're excited about that. And then obviously closing traffic for Bow Street means that Somerville Avenue turned into a 2-way with protected bike lanes in each direction, a teed up intersection at Washington and Somerville and Webster. And then the Somerville Avenue, if you remember, and the concept or the last public meeting showed like this could be a transit way, allowing buses only, or continuing a 2-way. And with a lot more consideration and discussion, it's like just to have this little part be transit, we question if it's really giving the buses a lot of headway. And given the fact that this area is, the big use is supposed to be a larger plaza with less traffic and make it easier for events. So what we thought is to keep it a 2-way with 2-way protected bike lanes, but actually get the bus stops out of there. So that way, especially when we look at the bus network redesign and much more rapid buses, instead of having a plaza with lots of buses coming and stopping and not really providing that nice pedestrianized feeling, we move that outside of the plaza. So the experience in that area should be much more pleasant for pedestrians and for bicycle riders. And in an event, it's much easier to block this off, and we don't have to move bus stops outside of that area. So that was our consideration for that treatment. And then as you kind of also recommended in your feedback, we are planning to have Webster be the protected bike route. Newton, which we asked our consultants, that it wasn't really part of their scope, which is why we're not showing it here, but have that be a neighborway with a 2-way connection back to the protected bike lanes on Somerville Ave. and Prospect Street to be focused on buses. And last but not least, to really tee up this awful intersection at Webster and Prospect currently with a connection from the neighbor way on Newton to then Concord. Oops, which I wanted to go further down, but it stops here. Concord and Webster bus lanes. So that's the big overview. And we're not going to build this all in one piece. That will be a catastrophe probably. So currently the phasing is that we considering Prospect and Webster and Newton, that whole Somerville Avenue intersection to be phase 1, and that is primarily in support of the development that's going on around there, but also the intersection we just talked about is in great need of improvement and safety improvements. And then followed by making the plaza what it wants to be, and going into the pedestrianized, but no, not the extending the plaza to Bow Street. And then the third phase is to switch the Bow Street traffic and Somerville Avenue traffic. And then the last piece would be Webster Avenue. And currently we are planning to start the design of phase 1 sometime, I mean, not the design, continuing the design to 100% to start that sometime next year. All of that is depending on funding, obviously. And right now there is no schedule for construction at this time, just because we don't know what the funding will look like. And that was the last slide.
Awesome. Just to check, are you looking for any like feedback from committees, community anytime soon, or should we wait until more specific projects are advanced?
I think that makes more sense. You know, every phase will have its proper, you know, public feedback, and we'll go through the general steps of that. And as soon as that starts, you know, we'll come up with a schedule, and you will know when it's good to give your feedback. That said, you know, if there's already something that you see here that's like, oh my God, you have not considered this, feel free to, you know, either individually or as a group give feedback.
Sounds good. Any burning questions or comments before we adjourn? Greg, then Ian.
Are there going to be any network reconfigurations of the streets around Union Square to accommodate this?
Possibly, yes. Okay. So one of the first steps with phase 1 is also some traffic analysis of in preparation to some of those dead ends that we're creating. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's actually going to be a really big effort, I envision. Yeah.
I keep seeing that Summer Nova wants to do some massive construction that's probably going to mess all of this up if you do a traffic study now. I assume that when we're not talking any construction for either project, it's like kind of all who cares right now, but is that something you guys are considering, or it's just to see who starts first and go from there?
To be honest, Summer Nova here, I'm like, I'm not.
Aeronaut and Brooklyn Boulders, and that they want to put like 4 giant buildings.
Yeah. So further down in Somerville Ave, that's what you mean, yeah.
But all that traffic's probably coming through here. Or...
Yeah. And also all the other development that's still going on there. Yeah, I mean, we obviously, every large development goes through its own traffic management and analysis, and all of that will feed into here, and some of it is like, who knows?
Okay, I figured that was the case.
Yeah.
And the Summer Nova is currently proposing 1,300 parking spaces there, so it might be a great time for the city to have them do far fewer parking spaces and make all these plans work much better.
Yeah.
More density, less parking, hopefully. Okay. Anything else? Seeing nothing from the chat or Zoom. So with that, we will adjourn. Thanks, folks.
Thanks.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. See y'all.
Good night.
Hey, everybody. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
The